That's normally where the camera is, and you just be not facing anyone in the room, which would be super awkward.
Yes.
Great. Lauren Schwenk, I see you're on. Are you able to record?
Hold on.
Yes.
Now I'll wait.
Yes, I'm here, and we are currently recording.
Okay,
so.
great. Okay, great. Well, I guess everyone is still kind of in the process of getting settled, but I'll thank everyone for joining. And welcome to Community Impact's first Lunch and Learn event. Today, I'm joined by some excellent leaders in the nonprofit space, specifically in Charlotte. And we are so pleased to have them. So I'm going to give a brief bio for everyone, introduction, and then give the floor to each of our executive directors and leaders to discuss their backgrounds and their nonprofits a little bit more. And then we've got a bunch of questions, and we're going to try to save some time at the end as well for any questions you all have. But the point of today's discussion is examining the relationships between executive directors and leaders on an operational front of the nonprofits versus the board of nonprofits. So I hope this is going to be a lot of fun, but I think it will be based on all of the great people we have in the room. So thank you. So in our room in Charlotte, we have Aarti Sura, who is a familiar face to all of you. We have Melissa Hovey, who is the managing director of Share Charlotte, and we have Patricia Massey Hoke, who is the executive director of the Women's Impact Fund. And remote, we have Dr. Sharon Jones, who is the founder of the Dottie Foundation. So a little bit about our esteemed speakers today. So Melissa is the managing director of Share Charlotte. Just for the Charlotte folks, is anyone in here familiar background with Share Charlotte? Well, you will be after today, so this is great. It's a social good platform that connects the Charlotte community to over 700 local nonprofit organizations. It's the #1 platform for finding volunteer opportunities and has influenced over $53 million of giving back to nonprofits. It's expanded nationally, is in 6 other communities with more on the way. And prior to her work with Share Charlotte, Melissa was with Dell Technologies in Austin for over 20 years. She ran sales and marketing teams there. Her extensive background in technology and marketing has propelled her desire to unleash the power of community into a platform for social good. She is a passionate community builder dedicated to creating a thriving community that generously supports its fellow neighbors. So thank you for joining us today. Patricia is a dynamic and collaborative leader who has been steering Women's Impact Fund through the challenges of COVID. She's created creative virtual and hybrid education and engagement programs, and increased the annual giving to the organization, provided strategic and operational leaderships to the organization's DE&I efforts. Prior to joining the Women's Impact Fund, she was the director of corporate and foundational relations at Davidson College. And before Davidson, she was a manager at Deloitte Consulting. She sits on UNC Charlotte Women and Girls Research Alliance Board of Advisors, and she was the past senior warden at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, the past board chair of DigiBridge, and a past member of the World Economic Forum Global Charlotte Global Shapers Hub. Very impressive. And remote, we have Dr. Sharon Jones. She's the founder and CEO of Dot Consulting and the founder of the Dottie Foundation, where she creates, innovates, and implements cutting-edge technologies focused on new age education. She has found her passion in education and has served as a computer science expert for the past 23 years, bridging the gap between our everyday actions and the application of technology. She is a highly sought after and national award-winning computer science expert. She also serves as a member of the National Small Business Leadership Council, and she was named one of the 100 Women to Know in 2023 by JP Morgan. And last, Aarti is familiar to most of you, but you may not be aware that she has an extensive background in nonprofit leadership. And she also has a personal passion for creating change in the underprivileged communities as a catalyst for generational change. Her nonprofit experience includes, she was the director of strategy at New Profit, a Cambridge-based venture philanthropy fund, the chief strategy officer at Catawba Valley Health System, a nonprofit regional healthcare system, and a prior board of director at the United Arts Council of Catawba County, Catawba Science Center, and the Women's Resource Center. So welcome everyone today. I'd love to give the executive directors and leaders a chance to tell you a little bit more about their nonprofits for a few minutes. So let's start with Melissa.
Yes. Share Charlotte was started here in Charlotte by a woman who lives in Foxcroft, and she was just trying to figure out how to volunteer with her family, and would Google search it, ended up with really big nonprofits. So she said, I'm going to make a tech platform that every nonprofit here in Mecklenburg County can come on our site for free. And you have a Cliff Notes version of what they do, how you can support them, volunteer with them, donate to them, shop their Amazon wish list, or attend their events. She wanted to democratize philanthropy and make it accessible for everyone. And that was in 2012. And she didn't know what she was doing, but she paid someone to create this tech platform. She's also a member of the Women's Impact Fund. I remember she was pitching the idea to other members of the Women's Impact Fund. They're like, "You're going to do what?" Anyway, that grew, and then we've launched nationally in 2018 to 6 other communities. But essentially, it is a one-stop shop for the community to find and engage and support local nonprofits. So we want to just make it super easy and support the nonprofit community and increase generosity in our community.
Please.
So have any of you ever heard of a giving circle? Giving circles? Okay, I see a few nods. So Women's Impact Fund is a giving circle. And we essentially, what that means is that we pool our members' charitable dollars. And then those members themselves meet and make decisions about the grants that they then make out in the community. Melissa is also a member of Women's Impact Fund. And so the only sort of requirement, as it were, to be a member of Women's Impact Fund is that you identify as a woman and you can make an annual contribution of at least $600 or $1,300 a year. And so by doing that, you can serve on our committees, you read all the grant applications, you get to vote on the grants, all of that. And, you know, different committees sort of do different things throughout the life of the organization. And so our ultimate mission is to strengthen women's leadership in philanthropy. We do that through our collective giving, which I just described, as well as education and engagement. So over the course of a year, we have about 20 education and or engagement events. Virtually all of them are open to guests. So any of you, male or female or otherwise, are welcome to attend any of our events. We'll kind of kick them back off in September. And we seek to engage, you know, folks in the community on important social issues as well as topics in philanthropy, to help them sort of determine what they want their community impact to be through engagement with other folks and other women who are interested in social good. We've been around for 20 years. We actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year and given away over $8 million in Charlotte through the pooled gifts of women in this community in that time, which is pretty incredible. So in addition, we're sort of transitioning some of our work from, some of you may have heard if you've heard trust-based philanthropy, if you are in the nonprofit space at all, it's sort of a big buzzword that's been thrown around, this idea of unrestricted operating support. And so we're really trying to think about how, and continue to challenge ourselves to think about how we can be better partners and supporters of the nonprofit community. So not just through giving them dollars, but through coming alongside them and partnering with them to do the work. And one of the places I think we have a lot of opportunity to place is sort of that next horizon for us is this whole idea of social capital, right? And so particularly on a nonprofit board, when we get into some of this, you know, connections and who you know, right? Or services you may have accessibility to, or things that you can offer as board members. And so what can we do as a funder of some of the nonprofits we work with to support them in making connections, things that can almost in many ways be more valuable than the dollars themselves over time. So that's some of what we're working on.
Awesome.
Sharon,
Sharon,
we have about 450 members, just for context too.
oh, please. Sharon, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, wow. So just so you know, those two women that just spoke had a very large impact in my own career. I mean, I often will tell people the reason why I've been able to form as a formative nonprofit is because we went lockstep with Share Charlotte, and they helped support and still support. I mean, I'm here because of Melissa. And so to tell you a little bit, my name is Sharon Jones, of course. I'm the founder of Dottie Rose Foundation, named in honor of my grandmother. Our core mission is to give voice and confidence and change the pipeline for women in the tech, STEM, computer science fields. I have spent the better part of my career teaching computer science and realized there was less of a female presence in any room that I stepped in that had to do with technology, teaching, business, community, et cetera. And I was in the high school sector and realized and thought, you know what, we've got to step this back a bit and beginning to support our young ladies when they're in upper elementary and middle school. So Dottie Rose has just stepped into year 7, which I'm extremely proud to say. We started with $100 in our pocket in 2018. And now we are bridging a $400,000 operating budget, which is really quite incredible over these past couple of years. But our goal and mission really is to provide that safe space for young women to step into. Once they become a part of our programming, they stay with us. We have a 95% return rate. Over the past 7 years, we have served over 2,500 girls. We've just graduated our first class that we now have 10 in college, and all are majoring in something to do with computer science or technology, which means our pipeline is working. So we're small but mighty. We're in the Charlotte area, and then we have recently grown to Greenville, South Carolina, and we've got a group of young women there. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to share more. We do a lot of work around summer camps. We do Girls in Tech Days. We have in-school programming now. We've been able to grow to, which I'm all about commitment and consistency. The one thing about changing the trajectory for women is the support, which is much of what Patricia and Melissa mentioned already. That support is critical for us to continue to grow and have that confidence. And so we now have in-school programming, and then a high school program where girls go through full stack development and data analytics. And I'll talk more, I'm sure, before the
Yeah, so excited to hear about that. Well, let's start with just a general question about executive directors and board members. Maybe Patricia, we'll start with you. What do you think makes a healthy relationship between the operational leadership and the board?
So I kind of come at this from two perspectives. One, I'm currently an executive director with a very active working 21-person board of directors. And I've also been in the board chair seat and served on boards. And I think the number one thing is trust, right? And I think, and understanding roles and responsibilities. So I sometimes think about, if this is oversimplifying a little, but I think about an hourglass shape. So you have the board of directors, sort of, and then the board chair and the executive director, and then it trickles out to the staff, right? So the board chair and the board of directors do not manage the staff. If there is a staff, that is the job of the executive director. And so something as simple as understanding that role and responsibility and sort of using appropriate chains of command, I think are important. But I think the most important thing is trust and having a relationship. So I think, for me, knowing that if there is a difficult situation, the board both has my back, but is interested ultimately in the mission of the organization first and foremost. And if there is a challenge related to achieving that mission, we can have an honest dialogue and conversation about it because we have mutual trust and respect with each other. I think it's really an important part of the relationship between the board and the ED. So that's hard necessarily for maybe all 20 people, and I'll use my board as an example, to have a really personal relationship with me. I definitely have that with the board chair and most members of the executive committee, and everyone else on the board knows something about me, right? Like I have 3 young children or whatever it is. And so, and understanding how I go about my work or trusting me to get the work done or achieve the mission. I think we have to know each other at some point on a personal level too, to build that level of trust. And that's what comes up, and I think creates that firm foundation when there is difficulty. So
That's great. Aarti, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the top things I'd say. I think the other thing is just be available, be around, come prepared. And, I think if you show up every 4 or 8 weeks or 6 weeks or whenever your board meeting is, and that's your only engagement, you're not going to build that trust. And so I think, yeah, if you're the board chair, like hopefully you have each other's cell phone numbers and you have some regular cadence outside of just board meetings, partly to build the relationship, but also partly to add value and be available for the executive director. And then I love what you said about just clarifying roles and expectations. I think a lot of the people in this room are considering being first-time board members. And so I think this is really exciting for them to hear from you guys, but also to just kind of understand, what's my role versus what's the executive director's role versus what's the staff's role. It gets blurry in smaller nonprofits sometimes. And so I think clarifying that, and maybe, verbally, maybe written, but understanding, okay, here's my lane and here's how I'm coming to help, I think is useful.
That's great. You brought up trending in disengagement and how it can trend in an unhealthy direction. So Sharon, I'm curious, is there anything that sticks out to you in terms of what makes a dysfunctional relationship between the board and a director?
Oh, girl. I think about my situation a lot because I am founder led. So in some of the instances where you're sitting in a nonprofit, you have an executive director who has come in, they may have been around for a while. I mean, I am the founder of my organization. Jillian is the executive director. We have known each other for the most of our lives, which already puts a bit of a different spin on how we run our organization. But I think the biggest piece that I realized is that many of my board members have been with me from the very beginning, but I've also known in my career, right? So they understand how that works. But the key component is having the formality of what it means to run the board meeting, what it means to be a board member, and then being very clear. This is something we learned very clearly from Charlotte in one of our trainings was, if they don't show up for a certain amount of time, they're out. So for us as a small nonprofit, our board is an extension of who we are. So if they're not out there advocating and helping to build the brand that we're doing, then they're not really helping our organization. So we actually had to let someone go who was a lovely human, but was not able to contribute. And we put the policy in, if you miss 3 board meetings, you are automatically dismissed. I'd like to make that less, but we are working to that attribution. But that's my big piece is we didn't necessarily have the perfect structure of how we wanted the board members to be a part of the organization in those first couple of years. And that is something that was not a failure, but a mistake that we've learned on. And over the past 5 years, we've been very specific about this is what it takes to be on our board. These are our requirements. If you don't show up, this is what will happen. It's only happened really with one.
That's great. Well, and I appreciate the attribution of Melissa too. And so Melissa, maybe you could share some wisdom on specific to more early stage startup-y nonprofits.
Yeah.
What do you think makes a really good board member for those types of organizations?
I think being willing to show up, roll your sleeves up and get involved. And that could be working the check-in booth at an event. It could be, wow, I am a great photographer. And so I can take pictures so you don't have to go pay the $600. So it's just really being able to be very open and transparent. Because I will say a lot of EDs, especially in the early stages, they don't know what they need. I mean, they're just running so fast and furious. So to be able to listen and go, you're going to need someone to actually manage this event, or you're going to need someone to create let's create a spreadsheet on how this program is running so that we can judge the effectiveness of how we're, teaching these kids. So I'd say don't always depend on the ED to always know everything they need, because they're probably learning as well. I mean, as a new nonprofit, I've only been in the ED role for 2 years. So I'm still learning as well. I tell my board chair all the time, we both didn't go to board school. So we're both learning here. And so, but having, as Sharon mentioned, hopefully a nonprofit has some structure in place to say, these are at least the requirements for being on our board. Show up to meetings, be willing to give $1 at the end of the year, like whatever it happens to be. But the structure is important, just so everyone's clear, but be willing to be there, listen, get engaged. It's why you join a board in the first place.
Great. And Aarti, you've served at some larger scale, more corporate nonprofits.
Yeah.
What's your experience of what makes a good member in that setting?
I think small nonprofits, you definitely are going to roll up your sleeves. You're going to be asked to maybe give practical, something about accounting? Great. Help us here. So I think mature nonprofits, you're typically going to have like a little bit more of a role on strategic thinking and long-term planning. They're going to have more of the infrastructure built on accounting and legal and marketing, and you're not likely going to be asked to roll up your sleeves operationally. So they'll probably be a little bit more focused on policy and governance. I think in either case, you're like expected to be an ambassador. It's like probably a little bit different flavor. But I think particularly with larger boards, there's also probably a heavier component of expectation of brand ambassador and fundraising. And you're going to fundraise every board you're on, but I think it is like a very big requirement usually on larger boards. It's great.
Yeah, can I also just clarify on the fundraising piece, just because I think that can be a scary, either I love to do that or it's very off-putting. I think it can look very different for a lot of people. Like it could be that you're not soliciting people for money, but maybe you're just helping to build the marketing for that. Or, I think a good ED helps you find where your comfort level is. I don't think it's, in my opinion, right just to put, well, the board has to help me raise money. Well, the board needs to be an ambassador and help you, but you need to help work with the board to find where their comfort zone is. So I just don't want, in my opinion, people to think that, oh, I've got to go raise for their complete operational budget on this one event. So that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody.
That's helpful. And we also, as a program, will be spending more time on fundraising because that is such a intimidating topic for several people.
Right. And can I just add to that too, like what Melissa said too, I had to think about fundraising to your point, that it's almost like the Heisman, like where I see like when I say, hey, I'm a coder, and people are like, whoa, like we say fundraising, they're like, whoa, tiger, and I found to your point of supporting board members to know that a lot of times you can give us every amount helps in any category in a nonprofit. There is no dollar that does not go used. So it doesn't have to be a cajillion dollars. It can be a small amount that you give each month. Or the one thing that we have found that really supports our board members is we create volunteer opportunities for them to come in and support the work we're doing. And a lot of times the bigger companies, Microsoft or Ally or Duke, will then match those volunteer hours with a $25 donation. Y'all, that's huge. That's like Christmas in March when you open up your mailbox, like, what? Benevity, bring it, right? And it's like a $200 check, and you're like, word, we did it. It's like, those are things that, like, I think that small impact, but on the same token, you're sharing your mission with the board is bringing in people for them to see why they're a part of this. And then there's still a financial gain. So fundraising doesn't always have to be to what the ladies were saying. You got to go out and raise $100,000. Sometimes it's just bring your people and let's volunteer, or you come and volunteer and match that, those kinds of things. All of that little bit adds up to the whole.
That's great context. Very helpful. Patricia, specific to you, you come from Deloitte, have had a corporate background. What advice do you have for folks that this is their first experience in a nonprofit environment? How could they be a good board member with their backgrounds?
Yeah, so I think perspective is important. And so how many of you, I'm going to guess not many, but maybe some, have seen the film Uncharitable? Anybody? Okay, mine's.
Yes.
I knew Sharon. Yes. I highly recommend. It's streaming on a bunch of platforms now, and really has to do with how we think about this overhead myth in the nonprofit sector, which is a separate question we can talk about later. But one of the things that brings up that I think is important, and I very much fit into this, is I think I'm saying this with all respect. There can be a mentality, right, that folks who work in the nonprofit sector aren't as qualified to do. They couldn't get your job. I worked at Deloitte. I chose to leave and go work at Davidson, and I chose to leave that and make less money to go work at Women's Impact Fund, right? So I am a smart, intelligent individual who has chosen this career. So I think sometimes there can be a mentality coming from the corporate space. I had this to some degree. I will tell you, when I joined my first nonprofit board, where I'm like, I know something, and that's why I've been asked to do this. And in fact, I learned a lot more than I knew going in. And so I think perspective and understanding, especially of a large nonprofit, but these folks are highly capable. They wear a million hats, and you were there to support them and be open to the fact that you likely as a board member have something to learn, right? So are there skills that you may have more deeply that you could bring to the nonprofit organization, as we have all said? Absolutely. But I think we have to have a thoughtful perspective about how we approach sharing those skills and the perspective we come from when we're coming from that for-profit corporate space, because I think that mentality does unfortunately still exist. And I assure you, almost anyone, especially someone leading a nonprofit, could work somewhere else, and they've chosen to be where they are. So I think that's important to remember. And then, I think it's sort of the willingness to get your hands dirty, and speaking to the early stage example earlier, just to kind of tell a story. When I was board chair of DigiBridge, it was founder led when I joined the board, and it was very much, we met quarterly, and the founder was like, this is what I'm going to do. We're like, great, we'll be there for you. I mean, it was just sort of like, we were a little bit beyond cheerleaders, but that's kind of what we were. And then he announced he was going to leave. And it was like, oh, there were 4 of us on the board. And it was like, okay, well, now the board has got to come into its own. And it took us sort of a second to realize like everything. I very quickly realized all the things I didn't know about the organization when he decided to leave. And he gave us like 6 months, so we had some time. But it was putting into place all those governance policies and procedures. So it was also, and I was at Deloitte at the time when all this was happening, being able to say, okay, what resources do I have access to that I can pull in to support us in this, right? And Deloitte had done a ton of pro bono work, and there were resources there that helped us build a governance structure for the organization. And what does it mean to hire someone? I had never really hired anyone, and starting from a blank slate. So then in that example, there were plenty of corporate, sort of basic corporate knowledge and resources I could go pull on that was helpful in that moment. And so I think knowing when those things are helpful and when it's mostly helpful somebody just needs to talk or have a conversation. And maybe it's not about pulling in the big fancy corporate spreadsheet, and some of that just goes back to trust and knowing people and where they are.
That sounds like board boot camp.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in everything that y'all are doing. It's very cool. Yeah.
It's really good. Kind of similarly, Melissa, you said you've only been in this role for 2 years, yet you've got 20 years at Dell. I'm curious, what have you had to learn on the job, and what have you been doing to level up in those aspects?
Gosh, everything. I mean, so I led giant teams, global teams, and so I had all this great experience. And so when I came in, you are a solopreneur. You've got we were 3 full-time, 2 contractors. I mean, so you are trying to build a budget, market, and do programming all in one go. So what I had to do when I came in, based on my corporate experience, is I broke us down into 4 lines of business. We were doing a lot of everything, but we weren't structured. So I made sure we had 4 lines of business, a mini P&L against each of those, so I could judge the viability of each of those. So that was a lot of my corporate background that I brought into this. And so I could create focus and strategy around each of those pieces. I wrote our first strategic plan. We didn't have one before. So I was able to take what I knew and put structure into it and create a rigor. I created a KPI dashboard, all the little nice acronyms we learned from the corporate space, so that I could see my metrics and know how we're judging and look at us over time and create quarterly dashboards on strategic plans. So I was able to take all that, which we've never had, and create structure around it. But that doesn't mean that, okay, I can just check it and move on. Now I have to go run the business, and you learn that fundraising is a relationship business, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so you have to create those relationships, and it's just, yes, it is, but it's so fun to have this purview of all of the different levers you've got to do at all times, and just be able to know what to go push on and be strategic and creative. I mean, the great thing about Dell was that for as big as we were still a very entrepreneurial organization. So owned your business. Michael expected you to deliver on what you were trying to do. So I'm able to take that practice into my nonprofit space. So it's so much fun, but I have so much to learn from other nonprofit leaders because they are running companies, every single one of them.
Great. Well, Sharon, who is running a company and a nonprofit, tell us a little bit about your ED is named Jillian. And since she's not here, you can use that as an opportunity to talk about her. Tell us a little bit about what do you think makes a strong executive, a strong executive director, particularly in a startup-y new type of environment like the one you run?
So I'm going to mention on that, but I also want to make note that I run 2 businesses. So while one is for profit, one is nonprofit, and both ladies just made that. I mean, even we are considered a nonprofit. The nonprofit status means I don't reinvest profit to make profit for myself. It goes back into the business. It doesn't mean that it's not a business. Right. And that's the piece of where what Patricia was saying about the trust-based philanthropy is so powerful. It's why April Whitlock invested in my nonprofit and 9 others to give us an opportunity to grow and truly create a business. And what Melissa was saying about doing the lines of business, that's what it taught me. I went in trying to do everything for all the girls and realized I was not being effective. So I had to do, what do we do best? Summer camp, in-school program, and we created a product. Those pieces, right? So, and that leads me to Jillian, because I am the creator. I'm the vision, I'm the one that teaches. So when we launched, I did every workshop and she ran the business side, meaning making sure we had the lights on theoretically, right? So what makes Jillian great is that she was able to wear multiple hats until we could figure out what was the best role. You know, over time, like we're both sort of doing these things. And then she'd say, well, I can actually streamline this now that I have an understanding of what we're going to do. She went right in locks. I mean, we grew this together, right? I mean, while I am the founder, she owns it just as much as I do. So if I'm to give some very specific attributes around an executive director, you've got to be able to be flexible, problem solve, and understand that failure is going to be a part of what happens. What you do with that failure is the true testament to your character and what we're able to do with the nonprofit. So we made lots of mistakes. Gracious me. I mean, I just think back to like, holy moly me, right? I even made issues of, drawing lines, but everything I've said is once we created structure and that main structure of saying, Jillian, these are your tasks and these are Sharon's tasks, we flew. But it took us my mom always says, when you have a change, it takes a year. And when we launched Dottie Rose in 2018, I was still working full time and running my consulting business because I don't personally gain from Dottie Rose like that. It all goes back to the girls and the people that we hire. And so figuring out that first year and putting those structures in place, that was key. But she was able to hang tight and roll with it. And so it's pretty cool to watch her soar and watch her leadership grow over the past few years.
That's excellent. So we've been touching a lot on building trust and building relationships between the board and the ED. And Aarti, when you've sat on boards, how have you built those relationships in kind of actionable ways?
Yeah. I at least when I've had, especially when I've had kind of more senior roles on boards, I think the building trust comes from getting to know people and showing up. And I love what you said about, not bringing our corporate hat to, I think there's you have to kind of take our three ships hat off for a minute and aim to serve, not to fix. You will end up probably in the course of time fixing something. But if you kind of come at it with the aim to serve, you will eventually create the right dynamic where you can offer solutions to also fix. So anyway, on the relationship, I would say this may not happen if you're in your first board seat and you're one of 20 people, but have a cell phone number, know something personal about them, create relationships with the executive director and other board members, especially if it's a big board, where it's more than just showing up to the meeting. I think that's super important. I would say also first 90 days, I would say probably listen more than speak, understand the context. I was trying to prepare for your questions and I was struggling a little bit. I'm like, oh, every nonprofit is so different. And I think just coming in and understanding the culture and context of the specific nonprofit you're on is, in addition to coming prepared and just building relationships, that's kind of the key thing you got to do up front. I think you do those things and then you offer help where you see there could be an opportunity for you to offer help. I think you then get a lot of trust. And I think with that trust, there's kind of an opportunity to have a bigger impact down the line.
That's excellent.
So true.
Well, and to your point of each nonprofit has its own thing, Patricia, one of the aspects of Women's Impact Fund that is unique is your member led.
Yeah.
How do you and how does your board engage your membership and create that sense of community within the fund?
Yeah. So one thing to zoom in a little bit, but to get to your question is we talked sort of about early stage versus more established nonprofits. I think another way to sort of think about boards that is sometimes analogous to that, but not always, and we're an example of not always, is a working board versus a governing board.
Yes.
And so often in early stage organizations, you see it's a working board, right? There is zero HR staff, there's zero technology staff, there's zero legal staff. Often the board, yep, it's all this person. And often the board helps in those types of roles or may offer those skills. Or we talked about accounting. I think accounting is a really good one to get into the staff early on, but not everybody does that, right? Yeah. And so it's often a place you see a board member come in from a working board perspective, right? And then in more established organizations, right, it tends to be more governing, exactly what Aarti was speaking to, right? So, strategic planning and policy and governance and all that. Women's Impact Fund is different in that sense. I told you we were 20 years old and we've given away over $8 million. We've had over 1,000 women as members over time. But as a membership organization, I have even less than Melissa does. There are 2 of us that are full-time and 1 that's very part-time. So I say we have 2.25 employees at Women's Impact Fund, which is part of the reason we have a 21-member board. Our board is very much a working board. So we have a grants committee, a community impact committee, a member education committee, a membership committee, a governance committee, finance, communications and marketing. And those committees really do the work of the organization. But for us, it's one of those, and they're all members. So everyone who sits on our board and who's on, we have about 120 women who sit on committees of our board, which a lot of you are like, that is horrifying. That's so many people. But for us, it's the only way we get the work done because it's the way members benefit from being a part of the organization. Melissa was our communication and marketing chair right when I started at the organization 5 years ago. And for example, our grants committee, the 60 women that sit on that committee, they are the ones that read the 170 grant applications we get and determine the 20 that go to our membership for a vote. I don't do that. That's not my job. That's our members' job. And that's a privilege. And that's how they get to learn about the organizations in the community. Same with our 10 education events each year. The members who sit on that committee make those decisions, plan those events. Same with membership. So, and we encourage folks who may not know something. So, and often you may find on a nonprofit board, if you don't sit on finance committee unless you know something, right? And ours, we say, you don't know anything about a financial statement, sit on our finance committee. We will teach you, we want to walk alongside you. Now the chair may know something about financial statements, right? Or accounting or something like that, but we want you, it's an opportunity to learn so that from our, training women as leaders in philanthropy, you can then go serve another organization. Communications and marketing, we can say that across the board. We don't have a lot of really experienced philanthropists in the group, but after you sit on our grants committee, you sort of have that to some degree and may think about how to evaluate a nonprofit organization for a grant application. So to sort of get to your question, how do we do that? I think we do it. I think sometimes a board is so governing, it can be hard for board members to really fully appreciate the mission or understand what the organization's doing. And so I do think there's a nice balance but you can also overwork a board and they leave because they've been asked to do more than they should be asked to do. So I think finding that balance in the middle of, creating enough buy-in on behalf of the board member, while having them at the appropriate distance for their own sustainability as a board member, which is often something up to like a 6-year term. Ours are shorter, partially because we're a working board. 6 years of our board would be a lot. And so most people serve 2 to 3 years, but it's a working board, right? Versus I'm sure most of the boards that you've served on have been more like 6 or, 2-3-year terms or something. So, and I think that's the role of the executive director and the board chair together to figure out what that right balance is. But based on what the needs of the organization are, and then who the folks are who are sitting on the board and what they're looking for.
Excellent. Good insights. Melissa, question for you. You in your seat get the opportunity to evaluate 700 plus organizations throughout the Charlotte community. What advice can you share with our team about how they could evaluate leadership potential and capabilities if they're considering getting involved with a nonprofit?
Yeah, great one. Volunteer. I mean, I think I tell people I've created a little document because I get this question a lot, like, I want to join a board. How do I do it? So I created a little document that says the Road to Board Service. And it talks about, go to an event. First off, I mean, you're going to see their bright, shiny self at the event, but if you want to get more of an inside scoop, go volunteer with them. Talk to someone who's served on the board. Maybe the board chair, so someone who's been there a while versus a newer board member, and get a sense of like, well, what's it like? Like, what you have fun? Are you working a lot? Like what, just get a sense of it's a fit for you. But so I'd say do a little bit of digging, just to make sure that, you can get some real world feedback on how things are going. And that, when you volunteer, like, does it just jive with you? Does it feel good to you? Do you want to go back and do it again? Are you telling people about it? So I'd say just kind of do a little bit of digging like that. But I think that's kind of a great place to start. And, feel free to date around. Like if that one, you volunteer and or you go to their event, you're like, yeah, I don't know. It's not quite right for me. We always talk about Women's Impact Fund. There's different seasons of your life. And there may be times where you're like, I cannot take on anything more. I've got kids and work, and it's not maybe not the right time, but there's other times where it is. And maybe to scratch that itch, maybe you just volunteer for a little while, but then you could serve as a board person later on when the timing is right for you. So I'd say, on Sure Charlotte's site, we have under volunteers, there's a whole section where you can filter for board service. So if you were looking, just saying, I'm just kind of curious who has board positions, there's like 50, 60 board openings there, and you can learn about their mission and reach out to them or just see if they have an event to volunteer with and things like that. But so I always say, just look around, subscribe to their newsletter, follow them on social media, just see what they're all about before you decide to jump in with both feet. But I will say Charlotte is lucky. We have the most innovative, collaborative, wonderful nonprofit community here that is really focused on solving some really hard community challenges. And I am so inspired by all 740 of them every day and what they accomplish and what they take care of that most of us don't see in our day-to-day lives. So.
Excellent. Sharon, I wanted to circle back earlier. You brought up board engagement at Dottie Rose Foundation and how you're creating a policy to, physical presence is a requirement. How else have you dealt with disengaged board members or board members who weren't really pulling their weight? How do you get them back to be good advocates and ambassadors for your organization?
It's conversation. It's, it's leadership conversation. Hey, can you get because things happen and over time, different shifts of your life have occurred. We run mostly a 3-year term right now. And because we find that the first year, too much of what everyone was saying, they're observing, figuring out where to get their feet wet, what feels comfortable for them, what role do they want to take on the board. And then the last 2, they really begin to run and then can support the next one coming in. But it's a lot of conversation. And my piece is that we want people that are a part of the work and enjoy the work and want to continue to spread our message. And so if that's not the right fit, and they were Melissa was saying about volunteer and date around or whatnot, you want to find what fits best for you and your personality. And we like our board members to be present at our events and workshops because it builds the community that our girls need to grow. So that's a part of our working board. So it's conversation, and that there's just nothing else other than that. Figuring out where they're at, what does that look like, and would they prefer to step back on to be more like an advisor or still a champion and partnering, but not necessarily serving on the board. We've really only had that happen with 2. And then we've had over the, at the course of time, people have said, I'm ready to step down and let someone else take my spot.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that because one of our values of leadership internally is radical candor, and how, positive but direct feedback can make a lot of impact in performance. And so curious if any of the executive directors have an example of when the board had that type of candor with you or vice versa that helped change the course of a dysfunctional situation or improve performance. Anyone respond to that?
I mean, one thing I can say is I have appreciated how, and I started at Women's Impact Fund as the first executive director. They hadn't had one before. They just had internal operational staff. And then 9 months later, COVID came. And remember, Patricia said I have little kids, and I was running this organization. I mean, I know what we were doing, and a lot of women never have been heard of Zoom, and it was a lot. It was crazy, and as it was for everyone everywhere. Is folks were concerned with my own well-being and whether I was driving myself into the ground, and that. So, and even as recently, we are on a July-June fiscal year, and the board does do a performance review of me. Every single board member takes a survey about my performance. And so don't ever be an ED if you're not interested in that. and which I really do appreciate, because, and one of the things that has continued to come up for me is my own well-being, and do I work too much and have an appropriate balance and all of that. So it's feedback I continue to get. So I appreciate that, because I think it's something I need to be called into and reminded of. And I think maybe particularly in founder organizations, when I think back to when I was on that board as well, you should be concerned about the person's well-being, because they're definitely not getting paid what they should be getting paid for what they're doing. And so that reward that may exist in some other places is likely not as much there for that person. Not that that's everything in life, but so where are other places, right, where you can support them? Anyway, I'm getting off base on your question, but that has been one that has continued to come up for me that I appreciate, and that has led to, hard conversations. But it's always been done from a place of like, I value you as a person, and you as a leader, and I want you to be able to hear that this is something that, we want to help you solve for. So.
Well, I didn't ask you to prepare for this, but that was such a good answer. And I feel like it will be the reality of our team on the boards of their organizations, that burnout and, maybe not being fully valued is a reality of the ED. What are ways that your board has made you feel valued?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's all the, financial compensation is but one piece. So for example, Monday was my official 5-year anniversary of Women's Impact Fund.
Congratulations.
I think almost everyone on the board sent me an email. They brought flowers to the office. One of our founders, who again, 20 years ago, she brought like homemade cheese biscuits to the office. I was just like, I had no idea it was coming. I felt very appreciated, and it didn't really cost, money per se, or, anything like significant. But it meant a lot. The other thing, which I have actually done, I had experienced in prior nonprofit I had worked for, we closed the office between Christmas and New Year's, and the board has never blinked an eye when I have told them that I was going to do that. And so we're saying, hey, like, just don't work on Friday. It's going to be okay. All the stuff's still going to get done, whatever it is. So I think it's thinking creatively about how you can support. People just want to be seen and appreciated, right? Like at any but I think sometimes at a larger company, you can have an HR team or a talent team that's thinking about that stuff. We don't have that. And especially at that ED level. So someone that, to have someone else think about that and do that is really can go a long way. So
Very long way.
I would say you mentioned radical candor. The board I inherited when I came on was really terrible. We had a very toxic board chair, and basically every member wanted to quit. I was actually asked to apply I was the marketing director before I was the executive director. And when they were like in the ED at that time, now she was leaving, they're like, Melissa, would you apply? I was like, no. I'm not going to apply. I was like, bye. I was getting out of there because I saw the damage that was being done. But COVID happened and a lot of other stuff happened. And I was like, all right, well, if I don't do this, we're going away. So I said, put my big girl panties on and said, I'm going to deal with this, and knew that I just had to buy my time until they were gone. And how do I go build the board that I need and really recruit for the people that I need to support me? Because I could see we did not have that in any way, shape, or form. So I've now been able to build the board we need, and it has done wonders for the organization, and it is to allow us to grow in so many ways. And we actually, one of my proudest moments with the board, we had a difficult conversation with someone who we were evaluating to join the board. And it was a challenging conversation. And I had several board members join me for this conversation with this potential board member. And the way they defended Cher and myself and the staff, and we're saying things, I'm like, oh my God, you were listening in that board meeting. I didn't know that. I mean, I just could not believe the amount of love and support I got. I was just kind of shocked, actually. I was like, wow, that's awesome. So a good board is incredibly important. And knowing when you have a toxic person on there is making sure they never get on is really important too. So
Sharon, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm giggling because it's like when you hear them talk, you're like, it's like a student. You're like, oh my gosh, they were listening. The light bulb did go on. Amazing. I would say the same thing. It takes time, and you have to find the right rhythm. And truly for me as a new organization, it took me almost 3 years to really figure out what my rhythm is and who I wanted to be on the board to support us. So, it's not always about the money. A nonprofit, you do this because your heart and the passion drives you. The money, of course, you need to sustain, but to what Patricia said, small things are what matter. A phone call, a note in the mail, a show up when you weren't expecting them at summer camp. We had one that did that the other week, and I burst into tears because we was by the way, everybody, I cry all the time, but it.
She does.
All the time. I can't help it. It's my thing. But anyway, so I think those are the parts that make your heart go pitter patter.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we've got time for any group questions. So anything that y'all have been thinking about as these women have been speaking?
I was curious to know what is a good commitment as somebody on the board? I think Patricia, you mentioned this of your team seeing you invest a ton of time into this. And I think as you look around, it is a group of individuals who are obviously full-time working, and likely a lot of young kids and parents and other things that we're tasked with. And what is the investment that you would hope to see that would create a good board of time, just what it looks like?
Just to make sure that the remote people heard that. The question is, what is the time investment that's appropriate for a board member?
So again, I think this differs based on organization. And I think if someone can't, if you're looking at a board and someone can't answer it clearly for you, you might want to step back a second, because they should have some clear idea. So for us, our board meets basically 11 months out of the year, and we flip-flop virtual and in person, and those meetings are an hour and a half. Folks who are committee chairs tend to be leading committees outside of that. Much of it's done virtually, but if you're a committee that also has events, then you have events. And so we actually you can go to our website, and anybody can do this, under membership, you can read about all of our committees. And we actually just noticed yesterday somehow the hours that we got hours up to, and they are gone. So we're going to put them back up because we had some sort of suggested hours. And then the way our nominating works, you can self-nominate and people can nominate you, and we're very clear for each of the leadership roles, because some grants is sort of when they're reviewing applications, it's a ton of time, right? And then it sort of ebbs out, and then site visits a lot and it ebbs out. Finance is the same throughout the year. It just depends on the committee. And then, a lot of boards also have at-large members. So some may have committees of the board, and you can be on a committee but not be on the board, right? Which is another great way to get to know an organization, and some board culture is being on a board committee. And then at-large members for us are not necessarily committee leaders. And those folks we tend to pull in for specific needs. Every board kind of thinks about at-large members differently. So I think that should be an easy, direct question to answer for any organization you're thinking of joining. And we have a simple one-page board of directors agreement. Again, it's a pretty basic thing. So if you're interested in being on the board of an organization that doesn't, whether or not it's something you sign, but something that's documented in a page, to me, that's almost table stakes, or at least the ability to clearly articulate it to you in an email, right?
Yeah, I would say at bare minimum, you're going to meet on a board once a month. Bare minimum once a month. Most boards ask for a financial contribution of some regard to the organization. And third, everyone has said this, to be ambassadors for the organization, and that could vary based on where it is. But ambassadorship, and then also varies whether you're a working board versus more an advisory board. But at bare minimum, you're going to need to go to at least one meeting a month. That's going to be at least an hour to 2 hours of your time. Plus, if you're on a committee at some point, so you're maybe 2 hours a month. And then after that, depending on the season, I know for us, summer is the season. So it just kind of depends on that piece. But, I would say that if you don't feel like you can step in and at least give 2 to 5 hours a month to the organization, then it's not probably something you should be stepping into.
Yeah, no, I think that 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours a month is good, and that can ebb and flow. But I think ED will have at least that list of requirements, board requirements, that you can at least say, does this work for me? Does it not work for me? How can I give? And I would say the financial piece, I don't think people realize, like, it's actually really important that every board member give some sum of money. It really, when we do our 529, kind of our reporting at the end of the year, people look and see, does the board actually give to that? And that, again, that could be $5, it could be whatever is good for you, but just know that it's not just a selfish requirement. It actually makes your organization look stronger. Like if the board invests them, then maybe I will too. So
Agree.
And boards that are more in the governing space, they may not meet monthly, right? They may be every other month or quarterly or something like that.
A lot of it is, I mean, you'll end up, my experience was like, it was always on average at least 4 hours a month, but a lot of it's social too. I mean, like a lot of it's like they have an event, like you're going to be like 10 hours that month because you're going to help them with the event some, and then you're going to show up to the event. You're going to invite your friends. You're going to call some of your friends to the event, which a lot of fundraising, by the way, happens that way. Like a lot of fundraising is not cold calling. I thought you made a really good point on that. So, I mean, like it can be a lot more than 2 hours. It can be 10, 12 hours. I think like I think it is like, I love, Molly, what you're doing around trying to understand people's passions and match them, because it doesn't like, sometimes it does feel like work when I'm like reading, the package and then like show up to the meeting. Okay. Like, but a lot of it doesn't feel like work. Like a lot of it's like, great. Like we're like having this fundraising event and it's a lot of fun. And, so I think like, Molly's going to help you guys find like the right match, and that like solves half of the problem. Cause it's actually pretty engaging and fun. And, but my experience is probably somewhere like if you really average it out over the course of the year, it feels like between prep and attending the meeting and then attending an event and then calling a few of your friends or, doing whatever they ask you or helping out. It's probably somewhere between 4 to 10 hours a month. If you're like, and it probably depends on the size of the board and what your job is, but,
Just equate it to not spending an hour on the TikTok and scrolling.
Yeah, right.
Doing something. Or you're on the TikTok or the Instagram and you're promoting your nonprofit.
Any other final questions? Why don't we give everyone like a 30 to 60 second if they want to learn more about your organizations or get involved? How can they do that?
Sharon, you go first.
Yeah, Sharon, go for it.
Oh, me? Oh, because I was just talking about the TikTok. Okay, so you can follow us on social media at Dottie Rose Foundation. We would love, love, love to have more followers. You can find out more information about us at dottierosefoundation.org. And that's on all, the at Dottie Rose Foundation is all the social media platforms. And then you can find me on LinkedIn at Sharon Torrance Jones, if you want to connect that way too. But this has been a real pleasure.
thank you, Sharon. Yes. So sharecharlotte.org is our site, but I would say sign up for our newsletter. We talk about all the nonprofits and all the things that are going on. I always tell, we're kind of like the Axios Charlotte for good. So we're going to be telling you what's happening, all the events you can go to, volunteer opportunities and things like that. So if you want to know what everyone's doing, go to sharecharlotte.org or sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. All the things.
Their newsletter is excellent. If you're just like kind of new to this space, like highly recommend. womensimpactfund.org. Again, anyone can join the organization. There's no application or require, anything like that. We're not going to quiz you on anything. It's just the willingness to give, and you can join year round. The summer is a really great time because we kick off our programming sort of in full in the fall. You could join any committee right now. Our grants committee, you could join if you wanted to. But once the year kicks off, there are some committees like grants that we don't let anybody else in because we train folks and all of that at the beginning of the year. And yeah, we're on, we abandoned the Twitter and the X, but we're on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, probably most active, honestly, on LinkedIn. But yes, and we partner with lots of these other organizations too throughout the year. But please, check us out. And we're always open for, cup of coffee or there's a big networking component to the nonprofit sector too that we've kind of talked to, but that can really be, I think, personally fulfilling as well, just to be in community and connect with other people who are interested in something beyond themselves. Like there's just a good gut and soul benefit to that. So
we're always open for being taken out to coffee or lunch. I mean, we're just
Well, I was going to say for Women's Impact Fund events, you can attend as a guest.
That's right. Oh,
as
yes.
well. And they're incredibly educational. Like I joined the minute I got to Charlotte, I met someone and came to an event as a guest and I signed up and they really open your eyes to what's happening in the city and they're very thoughtfully planned out. So you can date them as well.
That's right. Exactly. Thank you, Melissa.
All right, we are at time, but please help me thank our great guests today.
Spirit.
Great, thank you.
Good luck on your panel, Sharon.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Heading down there now. Appreciate you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Would you like us to grab some lunch?